Well, we continue to follow breaking news. A computer failure at the FAA has all U.S. flights grounded.
Now, the system sends out notices about flight hazards, and without it, planes cannot take off.
And we have my dad, Rick Bodee, on the phone, the president of Chicago Aviation, to give us an expert angle on the situation. Good morning, Dad.
Well, good morning, Rich and Summer.
Well, okay, can you explain for our viewers how this system works?
Well, what we're talking about are NOTAMs. They've been known as notices to airmen forever. However, last December, the FAA changed it to notices to air missions. And it's a requirement that all pilots, private or commercial or charter pilots, are required to review all NOTAMs affecting their flight route before takeoff. And that's a law. So if you're not able to do that, obviously it's not legal to take off.
And when we're talking about hazards here, Rick, what are they referring to that these pilots can't see or can't be in the air for?
Well, let's say this. An example would be a change in an altitude when you're making an approach into an airport. Well, these charts are changed every 56 days, but something could come up that requires immediate change of an altitude that would be critical to air safety. So, if the computer is down, you can't go to the paper version or the normal version, and these NOTAMs are issued on the spot, like on the minute, so that the pilots now know about a new altitude change, for example, so that if you're descending in clouds and that altitude is changed, you execute your missed approach possibly earlier or at a different time, which is obviously would be critical to flight safety. So that would be one example of a NOTAM that would be obviously necessary for safe flight. And if they can't know those NOTAMs, that's why the FAA has stopped all flights.
And Dad, one of the questions that we've gotten from viewers is what happens to the flights that are already in the air?
That's a good question. Of course, there's air traffic control that all flights are constantly in contact with. And any possible changes would be relayed as much as possible to the flight. And, you know, this is kind of a new area. So, you know, if the ground-based people don't know them, they can only give the best information possible to the flights en route. And I'm sure that's what's going on. I'm positive of that. So I'm sure it's all going to work out, and they're going to get it resolved pretty quickly. But, you know, there could be some areas there where information is not known and it should be known, but I'm sure the ground-based people will err on the side of conservatism, and the flights will operate safely.
And of course, Rick, with someone here in the aviation sphere, it is good to hear, hey, we can take a little comfort. This is something that you guys are able to work through and make changes for. Have you ever seen anything like this, though, before?
I don't remember the system going down like this. Of course, prior to 2000, this was all done kind of via paper and a telephone call. You would call a aviation briefer prior to takeoff. The number is pretty simple, 1-800-WX-BRIEF. WX stands for weather brief, and that briefer from the FAA would know all the NOTAMs. Well, now with computers and everything else in the last 20 years, pilots carry a company-based program or a private one that civilian private pilots can use, and since they can log on to the internet, all these NOTAMs are given to them. Well, the system's down, so now they can't do it. So no, I've never heard of a situation with the whole NOTAM system being down, but it's certainly more complex now than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago.
All right, Dad. Well, thanks for joining us here this morning. That is all the time we have. I woke him up at 5 a.m. for this interview because he's on the West Coast right now.
Thank you for your expert advice. I mean, we all appreciate it here, considering
Definitely.
this is a nationwide shutdown.